everybody. Every business is a media and entertainment business, whether you think you are or not. And what that really means is, yes, you need content. You got to put out content. Absolutely. The content tells the story, but you can't forget that a big part of the story is also your product delivery or your service delivery.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. It's another week, and another week means another episode of Leaders Talk, where we talk to business leaders, entrepreneurs, educators, authors, the whole nine yards. As usual, I am your host, Andrew Dupy, Chief Relationship Officer here at Leaders Press. And today I am very happy to have with me John Mashni. So John is a trusted advisor to entrepreneurs, business owners, and artists. He's a lawyer, writer, entrepreneur, professional, movie producer, and investor. That is one heck of a CV. More importantly, he is a storyteller. John writes about reinvention and other cool topics. And he also writes children's books with his kids in a way to teach his kids how to be entrepreneurs and to execute their fun ideas. So check out their first book over at cindertoot.com and check out John right now. John, welcome. We appreciate you being here. So that's a really interesting amount of things that you've done. Lawyer, storyteller, movie producer. Tell our audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, yeah, you talked through a lot of stuff. I'd say there's a lot of stuff going on, very crazy, very busy life, but very fun, very fun. I went to law school, been practicing law for a number of years, run a successful practice, really advise business owners, entrepreneurs, when it comes to business issues, tax issues, intellectual property issues. Been involved in entertainment, went to film school many years ago now. And so got involved in the entertainment industry, and then, with film and moved to television, and then music, and then representing authors, and then really representing people in this kind of amazing kind of convergence of everyone now has the ability to create. Everyone can make their own, videos and audio and books, and it's more accessible than ever. And so my entertainment background has really helped with working with some of the entrepreneurs that are coming around. It's like the modern entrepreneur, right? And I say this all the time, and I think I've told you this before, every business is a media and entertainment business, whether you think your business is or not. And so that just kind of led to me writing myself. I've always been a writer, and then crazy situation happened, but had an idea for a children's book, which I never thought would happen, but I published a children's book with my kids, wrote it, and then we're on the fourth book that's going to come out this fall. And there's probably about 20 more in the hopper. So lots of fun going on in my household, and really helping a lot of people too.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely amazing. Just and you're not the first that we've actually had that's come and said, they started kind of in a legal background and then ended up making transitions over into media and content creation. Was there anything in being in a legal background that helped you or prepared you for this, or made you kind of inspired to move in this direction?
Well, okay, a couple of things. One, the legal field can be boring, right? So
I was expecting you to say that.
No, in all honesty, I have some amazing clients, love working with them. But I do think that because I like to spend time with entrepreneurs. Okay, that's my default. I love spending time with those kinds of people. That's why my practice is mainly transactional. I'm working with entrepreneurs directly, creative people, business owners, people who have to make very large decisions, where I'm helping them in some of the biggest decisions they've ever made in their life, right? Buying a business, selling a business, some very big transactions. So I'm working with a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs. I'm also working with creative people, right? I went to film school. I used to act and was sang in the Glee Club in college. Like I have this artistic background too. So I think I relate to those people as well. Mm-hmm. And I kind of bridge both worlds, right? I'm a bridge between the business side of things and the art side of things. And I think people appreciate that. The other side of it is too, for me, I've learned that I wanted to spend time with my kids. And so one way that I decided to do that was write books with them, right? That's the most fun thing anyone could ever do is, tell silly stories with your kids, and then, have the actual courage to share those stories with other people. So I think, going back to your question about, did my legal background give me anything specific? I think one, I had a very strong writing background and training. And so I learned to write. And, I learned technical writing. Legal writing is technical writing. It's not creative writing. but it still helped in my ability to carefully select words and to just be almost like a craftsman in terms of like writing something. I also think that it gave me a lot of experience and exposure to a lot of very high level people that maybe you wouldn't get access to if you were, if I were just a writer, or if I were just something else. So I think those are a couple ways that my law background really helped me.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I mean, coming from a liberal arts background myself, my background was history. It's really helped with being able to do what I do now, just because of the sheer amount of writing that I did, academically and technically. So that is something that a lot of our audience has an issue with, though. I mean, right now, you touched on it in your introduction. You have to have content now in order to really engage the way that our current modern world is demanding that we engage with our audiences. And a lot of people feel that a book, and I think that you would agree, is a really good way to do that. But what difficulties did you have when you began to actually make that move from technical writing, from academic writing, to doing what you're doing right now?
Yeah, that's a great question, Andrew. I think so. For me, I started writing about 5 years out of law school. So this was, 7, 8 years ago now, maybe a little bit longer. So, but bottom line is, I did not have very much time to write. So I just started writing articles. I published them online, published them on a blog, and then medium.com, and other places as well. I really did not have very much time to write. That was the biggest obstacle. I carved out 15 minutes a day to write, which was actually difficult, right? I mean, 15 minutes a day for me was very difficult. I had to do it first thing in the morning, and I could write about one article per week with 15 minutes a day. So not very much time. And a number of years after writing articles and publishing them online, and today, I think I have over 100 articles published online.
Yeah.
You can find them on my blog, you can find them in other places. But I was only writing 15 minutes a day. And so when I actually decided to write a nonfiction book a number of years ago, and it was December 2019, where a friend of mine pulled me aside and he said, "How's the book going?" And I had some research, and I had some, I had a proposal, but I hadn't started writing a draft or anything like that. And he basically said, "John, this book's not going to be done till you're 60. You got to write something else." He was right. Like, that was a big obstacle. It's like carving out the time to actually write. And I wanted to do a really good job because I'm a writer, right? But the time, it's just very difficult to carve out time if you're going to write a book. There's other types of content that you can get out there, microblogging, whether it's on, various social media networks, right? You can write, but to write something long, I think the biggest barrier, one, is time for a lot of people. I think a lot of people also have the barrier, which I didn't necessarily have, but they just don't feel good, like they're good at writing, right? They may have great ideas, but it's hard to articulate those, hard to describe it. And so I think those two things are really the biggest obstacles that I've seen in myself, but then also in all my clients too.
Right. How does storytelling help you kind of overcome those kind of obstacles that you have?
Well, to me, the idea of being a storyteller is probably the most precious idea that I have about myself. I really view my purpose in life is to share the truth through stories and storytelling. And that is in my legal career. It's certainly in my children's books. All the children's books that we put out, we have a stated goal. We don't sell books. We sell about 30 minutes of joy with a child. And that only comes from telling a really good story. And sometimes they're silly. I'll be the first person to say, right? They are silly, right? Cinder 2 is silly, but it's fun, right? Like, most people, I would say, 95% of the people who read it, they laugh and they tell other people about it and they laugh with their kids. So to me, storytelling is one of the most useful skills that you can have. It certainly doesn't guarantee you anything, but it can apply across so many different areas. Certainly in business, certainly in, frankly, any aspect of business. It helps. I used to feel like a lot of times, when I worked for about 10 years before I went to law school, and a number of positions. And I remember feeling like, people weren't accepting my ideas, or they weren't buying into my ideas. And the bottom line was, I just didn't tell a good enough story. I didn't have the storytelling skills, not from like a producing creative point of view, but from a business storytelling point of view. I needed to be better at telling the story. And a big part of being a better storyteller was actually improving myself and building my own credibility, because there's partially, are you a good storyteller? What's the story you're telling? But it's also who's telling the story. And that's a big, big, big piece as well. That's something I learned. That was a very hard lesson, but I learned that.
Yeah. I think that there's something to be said. I mean, when I was growing up, my dad got me into flight simming, and it was something that we did. And he would always throw the manual out and immediately go in there and crash. And he crashed until he learned how to do it. And I unfortunately followed the same way of learning by doing, although there's a lot of YouTube tutorials. But it's about actually in that situation, learning by doing. And even with writing, there's a lot of learning by doing that comes in there. That's how I think storytelling can apply, is that you're giving the reader a better context for why the story is important, or why the content is important, rather than just saying content is important because A, B, C, D, E.
Yeah. I think too, there's so many different, you got to break it down, right? When you're a business, if you're a business and you're trying to tell a story about your business, it's not like you're once upon a time world, right? It could be, but a lot of times the story that you're telling about your business is in every single interaction that you have with somebody, right? And a book is just the beginning of that. So I think, to me, it's all about the story is all encompassing. The world that we live in, and I said this, I believe this is my thesis right now that I tell clients and everybody. I told you, telling everybody, every business is a media and entertainment business, whether you think you are or not. And what that really means is, yes, you need content. You got to put out content. Absolutely. The content tells the story, but you can't forget that a big part of the story is also your product delivery or your service delivery. That's a big part too. So it has to be congruent, right? If the content you're putting out doesn't match the service, doesn't match what you're selling, then that's a problem, because then they're going to think you're lying to them, right? That's how people think. And it goes the other way too. You could be a horrible storyteller, but you got a great product. You got to figure out, hey, how do I connect with the people who want to hear the story, whether it's a pain point or a problem, or you have a solution, right, that you're trying to get exposure to people. It's the same thing with me and my children's books. I mean, I can't just write a children's book and hit publish and say, that's it. People are just going to buy it.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. So I think you have to understand, like, what's the actual story. There's the story that's on the pages. But there's also the story of how you're marketing, how you're presenting yourself, the book, your company, right? It's all to me, it's a very big canvas that you have to paint on, and the actual words on the page are part of it, but so is how you talk about what you're doing, outside of the actual book itself or outside of the content itself.
Yeah. I think that this is something we've heard on the podcast many times from many entrepreneurs, that when you're doing this, when you're writing a book or when you're telling your story, what you're trying to do is build trust with your audience before they're ever in front of you. Whether it's in a business cycle or whether it's through even building trust that you're going to have a good story that they're going to read when they open the book in a fiction book. So how important is trust building as part of that secret sauce that goes into actually putting together something to relate to your audience?
Yeah, I think it's imperative. To me, I think of it as, and this goes not necessarily to my children's books, but to just being an authority, right? Like there's less and less time that we have now to do due diligence, to test, to figure things out, right? I just noticed the older you get, the more experience you get, the less time you have to actually research things. You got to make snap decisions. You got to make quick decisions. Well, when I have a conversation with someone, this could go with my law practice or some of the other work that I do outside of the law field. People need to know who you are right away, right? And one way to do that, and I love this strategy, is just have a lot of content of you talking, whether it's video, whether it's writing, right? Someone can have a conversation with you and they feel like they've met you before when you've never spoken with this person. I just had this happen to me last week. I was on a conference call with someone, a group of people, and one person didn't say much. We were just talking and we were covering some different issues. And then the next day, one of the people on the call called me and said, I looked you up. I went on your website. I read like 10 articles. I couldn't stop reading these articles. And she said, I love everything you do. I want to work with you separate from this other call. And it was just like, it was mind blowing to me because I was like, I never have talked to her, but she had read a bunch of my articles. She saw my website and had seen some of the things that I've done, some of the content that I put out there. And she felt like she trusted me. Immediately, she said, how do I hire you? Like it was just like, that was the start of the conversation. I didn't have to spend any time building the trust during a Zoom meeting where we're having a conversation. To me, and not many people have talked about this. There's been a few books that have mentioned this. I just look at it as you want to have a tidal wave coming. So when the crash happens, everybody already knows who the people are, the players are. They already want to work with you. You've already set the table, right? And now it's just testing. Like, hey, is everything you put out there, is that actually true, right? But you can really get people to make decisions very quickly in business if you have content that will give them a sense of who you are. It's not like trust to me isn't necessarily we're given facts and figures and that's how we get trust. No, it comes from an authenticity, right? It comes from a point of view. Like people feel like they get to know you before they actually talk to you. And you can do that through a book, right? You could do it through a video. You can do it through content. I mean, a book is a great way to do that. Like you feel like you know the person after you read their book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's just it. It's replacement of your business card. I mean, that was something one of our early authors said when he came to us. What he wanted was, I want to throw my business cards away, and I want to have my book to go with the boardroom and give it away, because that really is it. The book isn't a replacement for you meeting people in person. It becomes a conduit that actually improves those meetings and increases them. Yes.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it could be a book. Frankly, it doesn't even need to be a long book, right? It doesn't have to be. And it could be the new business card. I mean, to me, it's just all part of what, if you want to call it your funnel, right? It's all just part of how people start to interact with you. I had a mentor who used to say, he said marketing, he was a brilliant marketer, old school criminal defense attorney. And he would always say, marketing is easy. You just got to tell people who you are and what you do. And anything that does those two things will lead to good things. And that's exactly what a book can do. It tells people who you are and what you do and how to get, and what's the next step, what's the next step to interact, right? If it does those things, then it can be powerful, right? And creating a really good piece of content like that, again, doesn't have to be long, but creating a good piece of content like that, whatever it is, especially a book, can be powerful, right? Very, very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. So you mentioned several times about the concept of time, and that was a huge obstacle that you had. How did you overcome that? Because I mean, now you're writing, you have a fiction book that's come out. How did you conquer that? I only have 15 minutes a day and actually be able to get to the point where you were producing?
Yeah, it was challenging, right? So I have a busy law practice. I've actually teach at local law school, teach at university. Before I've taught multiple places, college level, beyond, teaching JDs, lawyers, work on different productions, 4 kids, crazy, married, dogs, all over the place. I have no time, right? Like I just have no time. However, I think that I developed a couple different strategies that really made such a huge difference. First was, and I actually wrote a whole article, how to write a children's book in 15 minutes a day. Just I explained how to do it, and I'm sure you could link to the article. People might like to read it.
We'll put it in the book.
But it's exactly what I do in 15 minutes a day. The other thing I think that is what I tell all of the startup clients that I work with, the entrepreneurs that I work with, is your biggest job as an entrepreneur is not to do the work. You certainly have to do work. You're going to have to roll up your sleeves and do work. But your biggest job is build the team first. Yeah. That's what you need to do first. You got to build the team. And so like, here's an example, and people could apply it. If someone's listening, you could apply it to any area, but here's an example what I mean when I say build the team. Okay. I wanted to write children's books. I had no idea what to do. No idea. I had no idea where to start. Just was like, okay. So I picked up a book by an incredible woman who I was in a course with many years ago. I bought her book because I buy everybody's book that I know, and whether I'm going to read it or not, I just buy the book to be supportive. But she wrote a book called How to Self-Publish a Children's Book. So I said, I'm going to write this children's book. I'm like, I'm going to reach out to Evie, there you go. Reached out to her, and I read her book, and then she helped me directly. It was build the team. So it's like, John, figure out what part you want to play and what part can you play, right? I'm not an illustrator. I don't draw. Like, my illustrations for children's book would be like hilariously bad, right? Stick figures or whatever. Not even that. I don't even know, right? But I'm not the illustrator. Here's what I do. I create the story, a fun idea, and I write a first draft. Read it to my kids, see if they like it. And if they don't like it, I make a couple changes, and I get a draft. Everything else, somebody else does. So here's an example. I get my draft. I have an editor, right? Brooke Vitale, incredible editor. She does children's books, but she takes it from like, hey, funny idea, John, to like incredibly polished, used to edit for Disney children's books. Like, she does incredible. So then she gets it into a much better place, incredibly better, right? Work with an illustrator. Her name's Kate, incredible. In fact, her newest book, Not With Me, it became a New York Times bestseller, right? She creates these amazing illustrations. I don't. I just say, here's what should be on the page, right? She just takes it from there. Layout person. I don't do the layout, right? That's building the team. Editor, illustrator, layout person, right? I'm not doing all this stuff. I just do my part and then let everybody else do their part. And that actually helps you. That's how you can do it in not as much time. Now, granted, it still takes time. You still got to work. You still got to do your part. Somebody's got to coordinate all this stuff. But I'm not doing every single piece. I'm taking what I'm good at, or what I want to do. Frankly, I don't know if I'm good at it, but what I want to do. And then I have a team of people around me that do the rest. And so I think that's how you approach when you have limited time, is you kind of outsource and you spend time finding the right team, finding the right people that will help. There's people who will actually outsource the writing too. This is what you do, right?
That's what we do. Yeah, you're talking. Wouldn't it be great if somebody did all that for you, ladies and gentlemen?
Yes. But I'm saying, like, if you don't want to do the writing, you don't have to. Just find the team. And that's the secret. That's the secret to writing. That's the secret to being an entrepreneur. That's the secret to business, frankly, is you spend the time and build the team, and then the team builds everything else. And you continuously build the team, and you just take the roles that you want, that you have time to do, that you have the resources, the skill set to do. Build the team. That's why I tell people all the time. I have a whole article about it, but just building the team is the main thing every single time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When someone goes in to say, I want to write a book, and they think I'm just going to go purely the self-publishing route, they just really don't have an idea of how much work really goes into producing a book, getting it distributed, getting it marketed, finding, are you going to have it stored in warehouses? Are you going to do KDP? There's a whole lot of stuff that when you start to peel back the layers, that onion's the size of Manhattan.
It's a lot of work. Yeah,
when you really start going into it. And I think that ends up being something that makes people stop, especially because traditional publishing nowadays, they don't really help nonfiction authors anymore, do they?
Yeah, my experience. So I've reviewed, honestly, I'd always wanted to write a book, but in my legal career, I reviewed a number of publishing agreements, right? With authors, between authors and traditional publishers. Maybe 15 or 20 over the years, a good number. And what I learned was you don't get as much support as maybe you thought, if this were 20, 30, 40 years ago, right? It's very different environment. It's much less expensive, right, to print, but the margins are very thin for publishers. You don't get paid very much in royalties, right? So, and they don't commit marketing dollars unless there's some special circumstance, right? You're like a former president, or right, you already have an established,
you have a name. Yeah,
exactly right. So it's just a different environment for traditional publishing, and it's a difficult industry. So I think the more you are willing to bring to the table and work with the team of people that you find that can help you, that's where, like, you got to take ownership of the whole process, right? Like, you have to build a team yourself. Like, that's just how I look at it personally. You're not going to get resource, even if you get a traditional deal, right? You're going to have some resources, but it's a lot of work if you don't get help. It can be overwhelming if you don't get help.
Yeah, and it's not something that you just want to say, oh, I don't want to put that into it and leave it, because you're leaving so much on the table if you just say that's too much, I want to abandon it, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, frankly, if it's going to be up to you to get it all done, it's just not going to get done. That's what's
Yeah.
going to happen. So, think about it as an investment rather than, hey, and what I tell people too is, if you just want to write a book to write a book, you don't have any other goals, like, we'll just write the book, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's it. Like, don't worry about all the other stuff.
Writer's right, right?
Yeah. But if you have a specific goal, like, hey, it's going to help me build my business, or I want to sell copies, or I want to, write, for a living, I think you got to think through, the purposes, what you're trying to accomplish, like, what's the end goals, like, how much marketing do I need? How much additional support do I need? What team do I need around me? All that stuff really does matter.
Yeah, I mean, I completely see that. So as we're kind of winding down here a little, I mean, we can go on about this forever, but so what have we not touched on that is really good advice for a lot of our audience who are thinking about it? They haven't necessarily written a book yet, or they may have had one that they didn't feel was, what they actually wanted to produce. What is your advice to them now, sitting down and beginning to actualize this?
Okay, wow, that's it. I probably have a lot of advice, but I'll kind of try to summarize.
Yeah, one golden nugget, something.
So two things. One thing is, you got to know why you're writing the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are you actually trying to accomplish? Because some people, they want to write a book just to write a book, like I just mentioned. And if that's the case, you don't have to spend as much time, resources, whatever. Just write the book and feel good about it. Give it to friends, give it to family, right? There's lots of ways to do that. But for many people, that's not why they're writing a book, right? There's a specific business goal, specific need. It's very strategic. And if that's the case, then start to think of it strategically. Get the right advisors, get the right team involved. Think about it. Like, is there going to be some call to action? Is it a business card? Is it the start of a funnel? Is it to build thought leadership or authority in a field, right? Like, if that's the case, get the right people on board and know exactly why you're writing it, right?
Yeah.
Are you trying to create the next Hamlet, or are you trying to create the next Stephen Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People that built an empire, right? So know what you're trying to accomplish with the book. And I think once you know that, then you can start making smart decisions, right? Hey, do I need to write it? What ideas need to go in there? What team do I need? All that kind of stuff, right? So that's number one. Really know why you're writing the book. Very, very important. For me, with children's books, it was, I wanted to spend time with my kids, teach my kids how to start a business. And for me personally, is just create a series of books that I could, give to my kids as part of some legacy, right? And then the big picture was, sell 30 minutes of joy to a child, and sometimes parent and child, but sometimes the child optional, right? So know that end. You got to know that end. The other thing I think, and I actually share this in, I have a little free email course for people if they're interested in how to write a children's book in 15 minutes a day. And I think that's the one place where I shared this tidbit, but I read a book by Ryan Holiday called Perennial Seller. And I think it's just absolutely applies to people, which is, when you write the book and you're creating something, you want to put so much into it that it can become something that lasts beyond you, beyond your business, right? It's something that lasts. And I think Ryan Holiday is such a great job in that book of explaining what that means. Okay. And for me, it might sound crazy, but I thought of my first book. Actually, I think of every children's book that we do, Cindertoot, Children of Cindertoot, Santatoot, and then Manpunzel coming up. Those are books I put so much into it. I put secret codes and messages, puzzles for people to solve, right? Like, I'm thinking through every single word, every single illustration for multiple readings so that it affects people and it will last beyond that first reading, beyond just that first launch. I think that's important. The second kind of part of that is, this idea also comes from from Ryan Holiday's book, Growth Hacker Marketing, which is, write a book or think about the ideas in your book so that when people read your book, they want to share what's in the book. Like this idea of virality, try to build the virality into the book so that the ideas in it are so powerful, and the ideas are they energize people. They feel like it almost like divides people. Like, Some people might hate it, but some people will love it. And the people who love it, like really love it, and they have to tell people about it. That idea, I think in many cases, you can build that right into the content of the book. You can build it into the call to action in the book, right? You want to take advantage of when somebody is energized by what you're writing and what they're reading, that you can take advantage of that. Here's a link. Here's the website, right? Here's the free tool that I'm talking about in the book right here. Just put it right in the book, right? Right there. I think as an example too, with my book, Cindertooth, I had about 25 ideas for children's books. Cindertooth was the idea that we did first, not because it's, I think, the best, though it is funny, right? It's a different take on Cinderella. But what I knew was, if you read it, if I give you the elevator pitch, Cinderella, clock strikes midnight, she loses her slipper, instead of, but she bends over, she actually picks up the slipper, but instead of, losing the slipper, she toots and she leaves. And so then all the prince has to recognize his true love is the smell of her toot. It's called Cindertooth. He has to go around the kingdom, ask all the maidens to pass gas, right? And then crazy stuff happens from there. If I tell that to someone and they don't at least chuckle, that's not my audience, right?
Well, I guess I'm your audience.
Yeah. And many people, they hear it and it's gonna divide you into two groups. You're either gonna like it or you're gonna hate it, right? And there's a handful of people who's like, that's gross. But there's a lot of people where they immediately said, I gotta buy this book. And that dichotomy is exactly what you want to build into a book if you want to call to action. So I'm not saying you got to do my story, but thinking about a book in that way as getting someone to take action is powerful, right? It's very powerful. So that's why we chose that book first, right? And not some of the other fun stories that we have.
John, that's such fantastic information. I love it. I think it's very valuable, and I think it's a hilarious concept. So I'm going to look forward to looking that up and maybe giving it a read myself just to see where that story goes. I'm curious. You hooked me.
It's very fun. Yeah, very fun.
So for our audience that wants to learn a little bit more about you, where can they go?
Yeah, best place is just my website, johnmashni.com, JOHNMASHNI.com. You can get links to all my social there on Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn and everywhere else. And there's a secret area too, which is fun, which I talked about. I like to put little puzzles, and you get links to all the books there too. And then cindertooth.com is where you can find the free email course. And I have a bunch of my articles posted on the John Mashni site as well. So that's the best way to reach out, get in touch. And I'd love to interact and answer questions. And you can find me making YouTube videos and posting online too. So if there's some bunch of questions come, I'll just make a video and try to answer them all at once. But that's the best way to get in touch.
Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, those links are down below. John, you put a huge smile on my face. So a mission accomplished there. It was a pleasure having you, and we wish you the best of luck.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. Appreciate it.